Xbox and Steam are coming closer together. Sorta, but not really. There has been a ton of talk, and I mean a ton of talk, about Xbox and Steam and merging and doing all sorts of crazy things after Xbox posted up an image that was clearly mocked up, and the internet did what the internet does best and ran wild with speculation that the end of Xbox is once again at the doorstep of being announced. But that is not really what is going on here. And so after really kind of digging through the what we saw and what Microsoft accidentally posted, I think I've got this kind of sort of ironed out here. So, back away from the ledge, this is more of a materialization of things that Phil Spencer has talked about. And so let's dive into the nitty-gritty details because they are super important here. So this is the blog post that was heard around the gaming universe. It said, opening a billion doors with Xbox. Now, if you've been paying to Xbox, they've been very open about being open, right? Here's opening a billion doors with Xbox. Xbox Play Anywhere. There's now 1,000 titles that are supported with Xbox Play Anywhere. You can take your Xbox on the go. Everything is an Xbox. There's a literal ad campaign called This is an Xbox for things that aren't Xboxes that are now quote unquote Xboxes. So Microsoft is once again telling us what their plans are right in the broad public daylight. And so opening a billion doors with Xbox with a whole bunch of devices that are not Xboxes is a very clear indicator of what is happening. And so it was this image, specifically the Xbox app or Xbox launcher, if you will, in the background that set off the firestorm around the internet. So let's poke at this. See, right here in this screen, there is a filter option within that very clear mockup, which I have evidence of here in a second, that says Steam. Now, what does that mean? Here's almost certainly what that means in context for what we know so far. That is a filter option, so you would click that and it would filter the results. As of today, this requires no input from Microsoft, Xbox, or Steam, or anybody else. You can already surface your Steam titles in other areas that are not inside the Steam app. So what I speculate here that Xbox is doing is they're tapping into that repository or that database on your device, the API or whatever, however else Steam exposes them, and allows you to see those titles within this launcher, and then you'll be able to see what games you own on Steam from within the Xbox app. That is candidly what I think this actually means, and really not maybe a cent more, because there's a lot of things that don't really make sense. But first, how do we know this is a mock-up? Because I already said that. Well, in that same image, they list action adventure twice. So, this is a mock-up that made its way into this marketing image that's now been removed and replaced with something that doesn't have the Xbox launcher. But yeah, so because of that action adventure being there twice, now I guess candidly it could potentially be there, but they're the exact same spelling and the exact same hyphenation. So for what I know about databases like that wouldn't work, but anyways, they could be slightly different in some capacity. I don't know, and then that would show up, but I think that's really leaning too far into this as a real mock-up scenario. Anyway, so that Steam button is there. They can pull it up. You could be able to, I think you can do this with Epic titles as well, but Phil Spencer has already talked about, hey, we want to bring Epic and Steam and all that other content stuff to Xbox consoles. Now, how do you do that? How is that going to happen, right? There's the literal run the actual app on Xbox, but that's a huge leap, right? That is a big change of things, unlike just being able to surface the titles within the application itself. So that is most likely what it means. People have gone really off the edge about this means that Steam and Xbox are merging their libraries. There's really there's no incentive for either company to do this. And at the end of the day, there's not a lot of incentive for Steam to really bend over to the Xbox will because what does Steam gain? One thing that has been speculated that maybe has some basis in reality is what if Xbox Play Anywhere titles were now also supported within Steam? Now that is not crazy, but you got to understand that what is the incentive for Steam to allow this? If it's just to be a good game player, that's not really it, because that incentivizes people to buy things on other platforms and then play them on Steam, and Steam is a business and tries to make money. And so that doesn't really feel it doesn't pass the gut check of does this even make sense for any company involved? Not to mention the companies that make games that are part of Play Anywhere, they want to sell you the title more than one time. And it makes some sense, right, when it's on your Xbox console and being able to play it in the cloud and that sort of thing. It's also a much smaller market than the desktop PC space. But if you're going to play on the PC, they kind of want to resell you that same title, even though you want to think every company's like, oh, we're a feel-good company and we want to do that. Like they do. They really do want to sell you the same title more than once. That's why we have remastered editions and they're not free and all of that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, when you think about Steam, what I think this is starting to make more sense is, remember Phil Spencer talking about handhelds, right? Handhelds are a thing that are coming from Xbox. There's the rumor of the launch this year in 2025 that there will be a handheld with a little Xbox guide button on there. And so, it'd be super helpful is if you could launch any game that you own from that smaller screen from one single application, including your Steam titles. And so I suspect that might be the realistic reason this image actually shows up and might become a real thing, especially and most importantly, first on handhelds. Phil Spencer has again said, how do we differentiate an Xbox branded handheld from the vast majority of devices already on the market? This is one way they could do this. However, all those ROG allies and other handheld devices more than likely would be able to tap into this Xbox app as well, or this Xbox launcher, which is maybe a better way we should start thinking about it, and that they would get that same experience without the Xbox button. So we got to really understand like what is coming in the fall, what is happening. But this might be one way that the Xbox launcher stands out, but this is clearly not going to be enough and would not be the end of the story to truly understand. We already know right now, at least from what we've heard, but again, wait until Xbox makes their pitch, that this upcoming handheld this year will not play Xbox native games, only PC games, only play anywhere titles and cloud streaming, and maybe you can launch Steam games from there, and maybe you can launch Epic titles. But again, you got to think about where does the money flow and how does this make the lives better of not just the gamers, but the companies who are supporting the back-end infrastructure and making money. Steam obviously wants you to buy games in Steam, and so potentially for them, having their title show up in the Xbox app, maybe even from a storefront perspective, would allow them to make some more money and support this initiative. So there's a lot of unknowns here, but I think what we can really take away is that this is probably and most likely related to the handheld release. It could also be on the desktop PC space at some point in the future, but as of right now, this is definitely a mock-up. This is a mock-up and doesn't mean it's happening. However, I think we can all agree, based on Phil Spencer's own comments, that this is likely to happen at some point in the future. And so when you see Microsoft accidentally putting these things up, it's like, hey, we know they're talking about it. They're putting some digital ink, if you will, pen to paper mentality here for this sort of release. And it's just a matter of time before something like that shows up. The question of when will it show up? My guess would be potentially second half of this year, when it makes sense, when they're tying it to other announcements. So yeah, for people who are, again, once shouting from the rooftops that this is further evidence that Xbox is dead, I really don't interpret it that way, right? Xbox is opening 1 billion doors, right? Xbox Play Anywhere, 1,000 titles. Xbox is building a handheld and they're working with partners, and I think the future continues to be bright. It's just different, and I think that is what confuses most people, is that the future is not going to be like the past. As always, my friends, make sure to keep it subscribed here if you want to find out what's going on, because the only BS in this channel is me. I really almost flubbed that.